not get 1,000 feedback loops happening. Uh-oh, we lost somebody. It's thinking about it. All right. Uh-oh, we lost. Okay, and now it's live, but I am not in there. Okay. Live on Facebook.
Woohoo.
Right, live from the Luxor in downtown Las Vegas on the strip, right? One day, I don't know, what would a behavior analyst do in Las Vegas?
Oh, a
Or the
lot.
better question is, what would they do that somebody would pay us for? All right, you guys. All right. Well, so welcome. I'm Jenny Nowak with Plus One Solutions. Thank you for joining us here this evening. We have one of our trainees, Katie Conrado, and I'm going to let her tell you about herself, but she is going to talk to us about graphing the ABA way, and this is part one. And make sure, if you guys have not already, Katie is going to walk us through a very hands-on adventure tonight. So if you don't have the Excel spreadsheet, download it. It's in the chat box. It's in the chat. And I believe it's in several places in the Facebook group. And for those of you that might be joining live on Facebook, I'm going to go put this in the chat over there. But Katie, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny. My name is Katie Conrado. I am a behavior specialist for a school district in San Jose, California. And today we will be doing some graphing the ABA way. We're going to cover the basics, some of the basics, and then we will also add in some tips and tricks and maybe a little bit of extras there as well. You will need the Excel spreadsheet if you are going to be following along. It does need to be done in Excel. This is not, it doesn't quite work for Google Sheets. And it is for my version of Excel. Yours, if you have any version of Excel, you should be able to find the same things. And if you need any help with that, just let us know. We can help you troubleshoot. Okay. And thank you so much, those of you who are joining live. Thank you so much for joining. And those of you who are watching later, thank you so much. Either way, this is, as Jenny said, it is interactive, it is hands-on, and so you will need that spreadsheet. If you don't have the spreadsheet, it might feel a little bit slow as we are working through these things. So why don't we get started? I will just sort of introduce what we're going to be doing and show some of the materials that we're working with as everyone gets their things together. We also have a guided notes document. That's more optional. You can follow along with the guided notes as we go, and then you can also use the guided notes later to graph any set of data with these steps. So let's get started. I will now share my screen. Okay, so this is the guided notes document. So if you have this, it can be beneficial. Like I said, these are the steps that we're going to follow, and you can also use this later to follow the steps to graph any set of data. There's also a link, if you have the actual file, to the Excel spreadsheet. Download that to Excel. And then on the bottom, we also have a feedback form for the very end of the training, but I will remind you of that at the end. You also, hopefully, the most important part for actually being able to graph this data is going to be the Excel spreadsheet. So this is what it's going to look like for you. And I will be working on a different document that'll show us the steps, but this is what you should be looking at, hopefully, right now with the little zoom in the corner, maybe. So let's get started. Okay. So here is the screen that I will be working off of. So hopefully some of you will be making this graph live with us. If you feel comfortable, I will be asking at certain points for people to share their graphs or maybe talk about what they're seeing, maybe analyze, visually analyze the graph. And so I will be asking for volunteers throughout if you feel comfortable. All right, let's get started. Okay, so here is my document. Here are the steps that I'm going to take. So the first thing I'm going to do is show all of the steps really quick and go over the steps that we will be doing. So first, we're going to review the data set. We're going to look at the data and just try to wrap our minds around what we're looking at and what we're going to be graphing. Then we're going to create the graph. We will then do some formatting on the graph. We will remove the grid lines. We're going to add a line on the y-axis because the automatic graph just doesn't do that. We're going to change some of the colors to make it easier for us and stakeholders to analyze. We will delete the key because we don't need that. We're going to add axis labels. We're going to add the client's name. I'll add the client's name to this one. We'll also add a phase change line because that's very important. Label the phases, also very important. And then finally, we will add a trend line. So those are the steps that we are going to follow. And I see a few people are joining. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully, I'll just review really quick. Hopefully you all have the Excel spreadsheet that is listed in the chat. I think Jenny will be posting that link again. Just make sure to download that to Excel so that you're working in Excel. Okay. Now, hopefully, it's been about 10 minutes, so hopefully everyone has this document opened up and is ready to go because we are going to start with step 1, which is review the data set. So we are looking at this as if it is an actual data set that was collected. These are numbers that I made up. I just feel ethically like I should tell you that. This is a made up data set on a behavior of aggression. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to look at the behavior, I'm going to look at the target and just kind of look at the numbers. So aggression is defined as any occurrence of making contact with any part of another person's body using a foot or with an open or closed fist from a distance of 6 inches or more. So that is the behavior that has been tracked. The target is that aggressive behavior will decrease to 0 occurrences per hour by 2/15/2023. And I can see the dates here are from January 16th, 2023 to February 6th, 2023. So that target hasn't quite come up, but we're getting close to it. I can see that. I can also see that we have a couple days of baseline here. And then it looks like we have a phase change because we have a gap and then we have the intervention. And one thing that I wanted to point out, because this was tricky for me and I recently figured it out, is you can see that the intervention and the baseline data are on 2 different rows. That is because when I add the trend line to the graph, I want the trend line to only include the intervention data. And so having these on 2 separate rows is going to separate the trend line. So the trend line is only going to show the intervention data. And you will see how these 2 sort of show up differently on the graph. And that's the reason why we'll have to change those colors later on. So I just wanted to point that out because it was really helpful for me. So I can see that we have 3 days of baseline. We have 10 days of data. Okay, so here we go. I feel pretty good about looking at my data. Now it is time to insert my graph. Once I insert my graph, we'll do some formatting and I'll take a look at the graph just to make sure that it sort of looks like it's representing the data correctly. Okay, here we go. So if you have the guided notes, we are now going to be on step 2, creating the graph. So I'm going to go down here. We are now creating our graph. Okay, we are going to select from baseline 1 all the way down to the bottom right corner. So I did not include the intervention baseline. It just, those rows I just included from baseline 1 all the way down. And then I'm going to insert. I'm going to go over, oops, had to move my zoom. And I am going to insert the line with markers. So make sure that you choose the line with markers and insert. And now we have a graph. But this, if I just looked at this graph, I would have no idea what it was telling me. It just says chart title. It does have the baseline and the dates at the bottom. So that's one thing that I want to look at right now is look at my graph. Does it look right? My x-axis looks pretty good. I've got my baselines, I've got my dates, they're at a nice angle, I can read them, they're visually appealing. I look at my y-axis, I have my numbers up to 12, that's the maximum, or up to 14, 12 is the maximum. So that all looks pretty good. So now I'm gonna go to step 3. Step 3, we're just going to remove the grid line. So now we're just going to do a few basic tweaks to this to make it a little bit more in line with ABA standards and also to make it easier to analyze. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to select the grid lines. So if you saw what I just did, right now the grid lines are not selected. The entire chart is selected. So I'm going to try and click just on the grid lines. I can tell they're selected because those little blue dots are selected on, pop up on all sides. And then I'm just going to hit my delete key or my backspace. It's going to make the grid lines go away. There is one other way that I could do that, but it's a little bit tricky because I have to go right on. I could select the grid line and then right click and then delete. It's a little bit trickier, but okay. So we've got that. That was easy. Next, add a line on the y-axis. So here is the y-axis over here. We have the y-axis and then we have the x-axis. We already took a look at the x-axis with, okay, it's got a line, it's got my times, they're equal intervals, but my y-axis does not have that line. Numbers look good, but we don't have the line. So I need to add my line. So I am going to double click on the y-axis. So I just clicked that twice and it popped up with this menu on the right. You might get that menu a different way, or the menu might look different for you depending on what version of Excel you have. So another way that I could have reached that menu was I have my y-axis selected. I'm going to right click on the y-axis, and then I'm going to click Format Axis down here. That's also going to pop that up. So whichever way you have that.
Katie?
Yes.
Are you able to make your graph a little bigger for us?
Yes. Is that better?
That is better.
Oh, wait.
Uh-oh, now I made
But I don't want to mess with the
aspect ratio.
So I'm going to go back so that I do that a little bit more.
Awesome. That's
Even?
great.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
Keeping that ratio a little bit more intact. Okay. Here we go. So we are on step 4. We are adding a line. We double clicked. We have the menu. So on the menu, oops, where are we? Okay, I got to get back to my y-axis. So I'm going to make sure that my y-axis is selected. I'm going to click on line. So there's 2 menus here. So just make sure that you're on line. And it says automatic, but it's on white. So I'm just going to change it. If I change it to black, oh, that didn't even go black. I don't even know what happened there. Change it to blue. So make sure that you double check that it did what you want it to do, because as you can see, it didn't really do what I wanted it to do there. So I'm going to go back to line. And I'm going to go black, but I can see, ooh, that doesn't match. I don't really like that. So I'm actually going to change that just again, for the visual sort of analysis, keeping it all the same. That matches my x-axis. So now I have a line for my y-axis and for my x-axis, and they match. The color matches, and I have everything labeled correctly. So now I can see those are good. Got my line. Y-axis is good, x-axis is good, my ratios are good, even though I made it bigger. So now I'm going to move on to my next step. I'm going to change the line colors. So going back to what we talked about before about the sets of data being on 2 different rows, that gave us 2 different colors. So now all we have to do is change the colors so that they match. Typically, standard ABA graphs should only be black and white. I'm going to keep this line blue just to make it a little more visually appealing for all stakeholders. I work in a school, so maybe if I'm showing this to a teacher, it might be a little bit more appealing just to have some kind of color on there. So to change the line, first I want to point out we have 2 menus here. We have line and we have marker, and we're going to need both of those. So first we'll start with the line. And right now we can see it's on orange. So I'm going to change that to this blue right here. So my line is blue, but my markers are orange. So I'm going to make sure that I select that again. I'm going to go back to that same menu. Oh, and as you can see, now I don't have those colors here anymore. So I need to go up to the top in case this happens to you. Right now it's on series options, so I just need to go over to fill and line. I'm going to go to marker. One thing to note here is I am going to need to change the fill and the border. So I'm going to change the fill to blue, and then I'll check that. Okay, so now my border is blue, my fill is blue, and my line is blue. Hopefully, as I was doing that, you were able to do that as well. And we now have our lines all the same color because this is all representing the same behavior. So I do want it all to be the same color, even though it is 2 different phases. Okay, so now we're going to delete the key. We don't need this down here. I was just like I was just saying, this is representing the same behavior. So I just selected the key and then I'm just going to delete. So I just pressed my backspace key. You can also right click and delete that as well. Okay, so delete the key, that is easy. Now we're going to add some axis labels. We're on step 7 for those of you on the guided notes. This time we are going to select the whole area of the chart. And if you have a similar version of Excel as me, you can just click on this little plus right here, chart elements. And we're going to select axis titles. And now we can easily add our axis titles. I know that my y-axis is showing the occurrence of the behavior. And so this will be occurrences of aggression. And I know that this is per session. And so I'm going to label the y-axis occurrences of aggression per session. And that means that the x-axis is the session. So now I have my x-axis labeled with, these are my sessions, and then I have my y-axis labeled as the occurrences of aggression per session. Okay, so we have our axis labels. And next, we're going to add the client's name. For this one, instead of a chart title, I'm going to change that. I'm just going to edit the chart title box and I'm going to change it to the client's name. I have made this client up and I have named this made up client Johnny. So I'm going to put Johnny in the box, and I want to make sure that my client's name and my phase labels stand out, that they're different. So I'm going to add a box around Johnny. I'm just going to put a line, like a border around his name, just so that that stands out from my intervention and baseline text. So I'm going to click on Johnny, then I'm going to go over here to border, and I'm just going to add a black border around Johnny's name. I'm just going to double check because that, I don't know why I keep hitting black and it keeps going to blue, but that's why you check after you change something. Make sure that you check, because sometimes Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you're working with does strange things that maybe you told it to, maybe you didn't. Okay, so and then I'm just going to move Johnny's name kind of out of the way because of what I'm going to do next. Because next I'm going to add a phase change line. So I'm going to be adding a line here. So I want Johnny's name to be kind of out of the way. So here we go. We're going to insert our phase change line. Now I have two phases here. I have the baseline phase, which I already have kind of labeled down here. And then I have the intervention phase. So I just need a line going up and down right there. So I'm going to insert a shape. And I'm going to choose line. I get that little plus. I'm going to aim for the middle between those two data points, right at the top, do the best I can. And then I'm going to click once at the top. I'm going to make the most straight line that I can. And then I'm going to let it go at the bottom. Now a little trick, and I'm not sure if you can see this. Jenny, let me know if you can see the, the width this time. If you go over to the top right corner of, well, it's the top right corner of my screen. I'm not sure if it is for yours as well. You can see height and width here, and that's the height and width of the line. So if I take width and I go 0, it's going to straighten that line. So it's going to make the width 0, which is going to make that line straight up and down. So I don't have to mess with it trying to make it straight. So now I know that it's straight. And then I also just want to change the color to black. Actually, now that I look at it, that I want that color to match the other lines that I have in my graph, the x-axis and the y-axis. And so I am going to change it. I think it was this one. Yes. So now I have my phase change line. Now I will go over to my steps. And now I'm going to label my phases. We have one more step after this. So hopefully you have been keeping up so that we can share some of our graphs and post them in the Facebook group. Okay, so let's add our phase labels. So for this one, I am just going to insert a text box. So I just hit insert up here, and then my text box button is right over here on the right. So I just click on text box, and it gives me a little, my cursor kind of changes. And so I'm going to make just a small text box right above my baseline. And I'm going to write baseline. And I can see that put a border around it. I already mentioned before, I don't want a border around my baseline and my intervention labels because I have a border around my client's name. So I'm just going to go over here to have my text box selected. I'm going to go over here to my options, and I'm just going to hit no line. And that is going to take that border away. And then I'm just going to center it. Make sure that that's not covering any of my lines. And then I need to label my intervention as well. I'm just going to copy my baseline box since I already formatted it the way that I like it. I just I guess you could do it on the menu. I just copied and pasted that baseline box, and now I'm just going to write intervention.
I think you can even use the right arrow key if you want to keep it on the same line. And you can just write arrow key. That's a little hack I remember at some point too. If you're a little OCD and you want everything to be nice.
I'm going to try that hack. I like that a lot. That's the key about making these graphs, is learning those little tricks that sort of help your formatting as you go. So you don't have to center things. And so thank you, right arrow key. Okay, so now I have my baseline, I have my intervention labeled. So my phases are labeled. It's got my client's name, and my final step is to add a trend line. This is a very important step because this is really going to help with visual analysis of this data, which is the whole point. So here's where we can see why it would have been a problem if we had the whole data set on one line, because it would have been including the baseline in my trend line. And for my trend line, I want to see really what the intervention's impact is, has been on this behavior. So I am only selecting my intervention line. And then all I have to do is click on that right plus. Hopefully you have that as well, chart elements. And I am going to select trend line. And it's going to add that trend line. It did add it all the way kind of through baseline from before, but really I'm looking at what it's doing through the intervention and what it might be doing after or moving on in the intervention phase. So this trend line allows me to analyze the graph a little bit better. And I can also compare that to the target that we are hoping for this behavior. So that is my graph. And then if you have the Excel spreadsheet, if I don't know if you noticed, but on the bottom, you have this example tab. So if you click over that example tab, there is actually a graph the way that it should look. So hopefully the graph that you made matches the graph on that next tab. And it looks like we did pretty good. So there it is. Now I would like to know if anyone created a graph that they would like to share, or if anyone has any thoughts on the analysis of this data set with that target behavior and where this, or with the target and where this behavior is going.
I made a graph. My Excel must be older than yours. It wasn't quite as nice to play with.
Were you still able to find everything?
I couldn't find how you got the axis labels in there. I had to just put a text box and make it work.
Well, I'd love to see your graph.
I was playing with it in Google Sheets because because I don't have access to Excel right now. I only have access to Google Sheets. And I think what I need to do is I need to make my data set vertical for some reason. I'm going to play with it and see what I can do. Because I think, because it gave me some wackadoo stuff. And I know I've done this very similar type of graph in Google Sheets without that happening. And is it because you need to do it up and I don't know. I'm going to mess with it and see what I can come up with.
Yeah, Google Sheets has just not been used for graphing enough. You know, through the years, they've tweaked Excel because people use it for graphing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I couldn't find, I don't have those cute little pluses that you found over here. So I've got to find it here, and couldn't find any way to make it format. I can do the chart area, but there was nothing that said axis
labels.
Yeah, I know I've seen them before, but that might have been on a different version. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe text options.
Where do you see text options?
On the under format chart area.
Yeah, it's how big you want your type. Right. What do you want your type to look like?
No.
Yeah, I've clicked on everything, but it's okay. I mean, I know how to put it in here and it gives you the little spinny thing. So
Yeah,
you
you still made it work.
can give it the turn.
Nice job. And Gemma, if you want to add whatever you find out about tweaking your stuff in Google Sheets, if you want to add it to the comments, we'll add this video on the group chat. I'm really curious too, because I tried, I took the Excel workbook and tried it in Google Sheets just to see if people could use that as well. And I could not quite get it to work. So if you can get that to work, I would be very curious to know how. Okay, so we will post this video in the Facebook group. And if anyone made their graphs, we would love it if you would take a picture or take a screenshot and post it to the I guess it will be a post in the Facebook group.
Yeah, probably just put it in the comments under the live stream video.
Yes, please put it in the comments. And if you find out any more about, or if you had some things that you needed to change because you had a different version, pop it in the comments. If you had to do it in Google Sheets and found a different way, please post that in the comments too, because we are all learning.
And I seem to remember there was something, because I think I'm trying to remember, we did a graph and because I'm going to have the problem with the missing days at some point.
Yes.
But there was a way that we did that, right?
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up, Gemma. We are going to have a part 2, advanced ABA graphing, and we are going to talk about no data days. What do we do when there's no data days? What do we do when we want a zero, when we want a blank, when we want a space, and a little bit more tricky graphing scenarios we will talk about. So that will be in part 2, advanced graphing.
I'm actually going to mess with this. I'm going to give myself, because I am on vacation, I'm not going to give myself a ton of time, but I'm going to see if I can get this graphed, because I think it's just a fun challenge and I think I should be able to do it. And I will post my graph or a link to my Google picture. I'll send it. I'll put the link in the Facebook page.
Make sure you log those hours.
Yes, absolutely. Do it. Katie, that was fantastic. Ira, thank you for joining us. I put some links in the chat for you, the Excel spreadsheet that Katie had for us to download. It works best if you download it to your computer to Excel. Gemma's talking about not having Excel, so she's trying it in Sheets. And there are also guided notes that walk through each of the steps that Katie went through. And I also put a feedback form link for Katie in the chat. We love to learn from what we do and how we serve folks. So if you could fill out the feedback form for Katie, and those of you watching the live stream replay, I will put that in the comments. And if you want more information on how you too could do one of these really awesome trainings in this Facebook group through our supervision of ABA fieldwork experience hours, however, that's a big mouthful, you can check us out on our website, www.plus-1-solutions.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you all next time.
Nice job, Katie. Bye.
Thank you for joining, everybody. Bye.